Hello, welcome to class. It's week 2 of project management, and we're going to be looking at a new phase of the project moving along. And your assigned reading for this week will be the next couple of chapters, Chapter 4 and Chapter 5, one having to do with leadership in the project and also scope management. Now, scope is not mouthwash. Scope is the scale of the project, what's going to be included. And as you'll see, it's very important to manage the scope because there is a guy called the scope creep, and scope creep tends to make projects ambiguous as to regards to all the things that they need to do. And if you don't manage scope creep, you'll tend to end up continuing to do things on long after the project is finished. Okay, so these are some important topics. Now, the discussion for this week is going to deal with the project that you defined in week 1 and how you are going to acquire and manage the resources that are necessary to complete the project that you're describing. Okay, so on page 111 of your textbook, there's a description about acquiring project resources. Now, what sort of things would be resources? Well, at this stage, we're talking at a fairly high level. So, of course, funding, availability of money is going to be one thing, but also resources would be the personnel, the people that would be involved, depending on your project, the type of equipment that might be necessary. And one of the difficulties is explained in the textbook. One of the difficulties with completing projects successfully and on time is that organizations do not have unlimited resources. You just can't pour tons of additional money into a project. You can't hire unlimited numbers of contractors to work on the project for you. So management of the resources and acquisition of the resources is a key element, and we'll spend more time as we get deeper into the project to talk about more specifically how this is done. But at this stage, what we want you to do is to look at the project that you proposed in for week 1's assignment, okay, and start to lay out what would be the resources that would be necessary to complete that project and where they are going to come from. And if these resources are shared by other departments, how would you negotiate a sharing of resources? How is that going to be done? If you need a programmer, computer programmer, for example, how are you going to get that programmer to work on your project if they actually have a full-time job in another department? Those sort of issues. Now, if the project you've chosen does not lend itself to this assignment, meaning that you can't think of the resources or the resources don't seem to be shared, you may need to rethink your project. Okay, if you start finding that the project you've chosen does not seem to fit the definition and the requirements for the discussion posts and the papers, you may need to rethink what you're choosing for your project. Okay, and this is a good time to do it. If it seems like it's not working out and you can't answer the questions, can't think of how it would work, then you may be on too small a project, on too a project that you don't know the information about it. Remember, this doesn't have to be a real live project that you're involved in. You can use an imaginary project, but it has to be related to your work in some way, an organization, so we can tie together all these different phases of project management. And if this starts to present problems for you, then again, this is a good area to ask me questions, to talk about either in the Ask Questions or in the discussion post. Of course, when you submit to the discussion, your original post, your first post, has to be submitted to SafeAssign first in the draft form, should be reviewed and revised if necessary, then should be submitted to SafeAssign Final, and then when you're happy with it, the document that you're working with, the Word document, goes into the discussion forum. You copy and paste into that. Now, based upon the first week's discussion, it appeared that some were directly writing into the text editor of the discussion, and that is not acceptable. You have to use SafeAssign for your initial post. Okay? And when I give you your feedback on your papers and on your discussion, you'll be seeing that I'm looking at this. Okay? So this is important. Now, the paper is tied into the same topic. We're looking at applying resources, trying to figure out what resources are going to be needed to complete the project that you're working on. So now you're going to be writing a paper. In the first part of the assignment, you were discussing this. In the second part, now you're writing a paper using the same information, using the same resources, just in more detail, and also applying some peer-reviewed references which discuss how you manage resources within a project. Okay, so your job is to examine, analyze, and explain the resources you'll need for your project. Now this is at a high enough level. You're not talking about we're going to need 10 paper clips and half a dozen drywall screws. You're talking about we're going to need certain level of supplies, types of supplies. We're going to need certain types of equipment. We're going to need certain types of expertise to help us. And then, since it's expected that these resources will be shared with other departments, try to explain how you're going to deal with the challenges of getting these resources applied to your department, to your project. And again, if this is confusing or you're not sure how to approach this, this is a good time early in the week to ask me some questions, what I want. Of course, when you submit your paper, you're going to submit to the draft, review the draft, make changes, revise it, and then submit to Safe Assign Final. But because it's going to go as a paper, that then gets dropped directly into the grade book, and that's what I grade. Okay, so it's slightly different than submitting a discussion post. Well, the keys to success for week 2, and these will lead into the week 3 and the week 4. Use the feedback that you get from the week 1 discussion and the paper as guidance in this week's assignment. Okay, when I write things on your paper, when I make suggestions or comments, I expect those to end up being corrected in the future work. Now, if you look at what's been written in the discussion post from the first week, you've got some people with some great ideas. And so it's worthwhile not just to focus on your own discussion, but to read what other people are writing and to use their expertise and to ask them questions. Just like you can ask me questions, you can ask your classmates questions also. Proofread your work before submitting it. When I see things that have common spelling errors, they're underlined by the grammar checker or the spell checker, you know, it's sort of like, what are you doing? This is graduate school. You're not supposed to turn in things that have misspelled words. If you have a hard time correcting your own work, all right, have somebody else look at it. But, you know, you'll see me getting tougher and tougher on common errors that just, to me, show a lack of attention, a lack of professionalism in your work. And finally, you need to look ahead to the future assignments. Okay, as in contrast to some other classes, you'll see the project management class is like a project. You build upon what was done the previous week. So week 3 is going to build upon what was done in week 2. Week 4 is going to build upon what was done in week 3, and so on through the rest of the class. So it is in your interest to kind of see what's coming so that as you're preparing this week's work, you should be able to lead logically into next week's work. And that's why I'm making a kind of a strong point that if the project that you've chosen in week 1 really doesn't appear like it's going to stand up to the requirements of the future week's assignments, this is a good time to say, well, maybe I could look at a different, maybe I should look at a different project. I'll talk to the professor and try to figure out something that would be more robust, have more of the features that this class is going to require. All right. Well, you know how to get in touch with me, so until next time, goodbye and good luck.